tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. We've been looking at some of the basic meditation instructions and coming through feeling into really the nature of these things called hindrances, what it means to begin to strengthen wholesome states in the heart mind, diminish unwholesome states. And I want to nod a little bit at the beginning here tonight, just to the nature of emotions broadly, which was in the writing for today, and but mostly move ahead in the instructions in a way, whatever ahead means. But having come through the hindrances, to begin to talk about what they make way for when the hindrances are contained or brought to stillness, or in whatever way, made such that they don't impede the increasing steadiness of the mind. And what that is really is the direction toward what's sometimes translated as consciousness. What's translated as concentration. You'll hear that my voice is a little rough. I'm coming off a couple days of a cold with which we all got, but my mind feels a little foggy as well. So forgiveness begged. The hindrances subsiding makes way for the unification of the mind in samadhi, or states of gathered attention. And so then that's where we're headed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the factors known as jhana factors. These are somatic, emotional, cognitive states, elements of states that are particularly sensitive for the mind coming together in a gathered, immersed way. So one of the things that we noticed in the investigation into the hindrances was that there are really different kinds of things gathered together in this one list. The list of the hindrances includes these first two that are very broadly what we usually call emotions. So sensual desire and ill will. So the kind of emotional urge that moves toward or away things in the world, relationships, objects of the senses. We think of these as emotions often, as having like a heart quality, but of course they have a bodily or somatic quality. You know what it feels like in the body to be desiring something or someone or some experience. And you know what it feels like in the body to be repulsed, to feel a kind of hatred or ill will toward a thing, a person, an experience, a situation. So the word emotion is complex, right? It very often, we can't actually tease out what's bodily, what's narrative. There's an emotion that has a story with it, and the story fuels the feeling fuels and explains the story. They're completely interwoven. So the somatic, the emotional, and the cognitive, these are Western categories, often merge together in what in the Buddhist lists is really something like a state. So sensual desire is a state. And in a way, it's a full being state. When you really want something, you can feel it in the body, in the story, in the heart, in the urges, in the energy. It's all together. But these first two have this very strong emotional quality: sensual desire, ill will. The next two have a kind of more, energy level kind of quality. There's the low energy hindrance of dullness, traditionally called sloth and torpor. And And then the high energy hindrance, traditionally translated as restlessness and worry or anxiety. So there's a kind of bodily quality of dullness, sleepiness, freeziness, collapsedness. And then, but there's also a kind of mental quality of sluggishness, brain freeziness, confusion. And then there's the bodily quality of restlessness, jitteriness, inability to rest or settle, and the kind of mental quality of grasping at one thing after another, restless thought, what's called papancha, proliferation of thought. And those are really combined, like it's one hindrance. There's a bodily and a mental component to it. And restlessness, as an example, you can feel it in the body, you can notice it in the thoughts, but what that really means is that there is a kind of emotion of restlessness, like almost like the heart is unsettled, and you can connect with that. And the fifth of the hindrances is doubt, sometimes translated as skeptical doubt. This is really the loss of clear seeing, or the loss of clear view. Not feeling certain of myself, of the path, of my teachers, of my peers, of my situation. And in a way, this one's primarily cognitive, because doubt really rides on story. I'm telling myself something and I'm believing it, or I'm trying to tell myself something and I'm not believing it. I'm trying to say, trust the path, but I don't really trust it. Or I'm trying to say it's going to be okay, and I don't really believe it. There's a kind of, it's not only a story, but it's really doubt is really like a clash between two stories or more. You can have a whole multivalent doubt complex. Some of you might be familiar with something like that, doubting everything all at once. But again, it also has, it has a bodily quality. Often it comes with a kind of non-clarity through the somatic field, through the heart field. So part of what we got talking about, and I was writing about today in response to a question, was that this word emotion, this is a Western word, referring to heart stuff. It's ambiguous, and it encompasses experiences that we could break down into saying there's a somatic part, there's a cognitive part, there's a energetic part. And so what the Buddhist lists instead do is, rather than categorizing things by like, these are sensations, these are feelings, these are thoughts, it categorizes things into, this is stuff that's helpful for the path, and this is stuff that's not helpful. And so the list of the hindrances is stuff that's not helpful for concentration. And so it's a mix of these different kinds of things. Some of them are more bodily, some are more mental, some of them are more emotional. But they get in the way of serenity, of tranquility, of immersion, of stability. And the corresponding list is the list of the awakening factors, which is all the good stuff. It's useful for the path. And so, and again, this is a mix of kinds of qualities. And we'll see this in the list I want to touch on tonight, which is the jhana factors. Again, it's a list that has a mix of mental, kind of bodily energetic, and emotional qualities or aspects mixed together. This is a list of things that are really helpful for bringing the mind to stability and immersion. And some of them, interestingly, are both states and actions. That makes it even more complex. So as we practice with the hindrances to bring them to a kind of contained or subsided state, and we start to work with the basic instructions on gathering the attention. So if we're working with instructions like the instructions in the mindfulness of breathing sequence that we were working with in the meditation, right? You get this sequence, the first 4 instructions in that first, what's called tetrad, the first group of 4 instructions for mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati, are to be aware of in and out breaths when they're long, and in and out breaths when they're short, then to be aware of the breath in the whole body, and then to be aware of relaxing the whole body. So some of these are things you notice, like you notice the breath. Some of these are things that you consciously do, like you invite the body to relax. To say consciously do is even a little vague, right? I can make the intention to relax, but sometimes I'm like, relax, but it's not happening. Like, come on, relax. It's still not happening. Like you can invite the body to relax, but it takes some practice to be like, I'm contacting the musculature, I'm contacting the nervous system. And sometimes to relax, I need to tell the body that it's safe. So like one hack is to get into a safe space. That's not a hack, that's just a really good thing to do. But then the hack is to look around. So you let your eyes wander and you try to really like just take in your space, almost like the eyes are just doing their own thing. And what you're doing is you're trying to tune into this autonomic nervous system activity where the head swivels on its axis in the horizontal plane, because we're vertical kinds of animals. And with that rotation, you take in the horizon, which means you take in all the other you take in the environment and the animals around you and the people and all that. And there's a little like, I'm trying to tell my nervous system that nothing is here that's unsafe, that's going to harm me. So sometimes I can't just relax, but I actually have to teach the body, nervous system, heart, mind that it's safe. And only once that happens, once that really gets in, will the body relax. And so this is a practice called orientation that we've done a lot of here. So I'm doing these exercises. This is really like types of directed attention. And the thing that I'm going for with these basic instructions, these are like basic concentration instructions or immersion instructions. The word concentration, again, it's problematic. It tends to seem like you're clenching, but it's really, it's concentrating the way like you would boil down like a soup stock to make it more concentrated, right? To make the flavor richer. You're bringing together the flavors by simmering off the excess. So you're coming into a richer, more filled out flavor in the body. Now I'm mixing my metaphors, and I'm like, and you go toward immersion, like you immerse yourself in the soup. I don't know, but these instructions then they're somatic, they're attentional, and as the hindrances subside, it becomes possible to practice in a more specific way. So the initial instructions, if we use the Anapanasati instructions, at first they're very general. Notice the breath, notice long and short breaths, notice in and out breaths. Notice the breath in the whole body, relax the body. Generally here, throughout that sequence, I think of the object of meditation, the main thing I'm paying attention to, giving my attention to, is the breath in the whole body. And there's lots of different ways to do this. This is the way I like to do it. Partly comes from instructions that I've learned from an American monk named Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who emphasizes the breath in the whole body. There's different ways to play with this instruction, but breathing into the whole body gives me the sense of this one anchor of attention that is dynamic, that's alive. I can feel the wave of the breath in it, and the whole bodiness of it allows this instruction to both spread the breath, notice the details of the breath, in, out, long, short, and relax the body, to be all brought together into one thing. So I'm not really running through them in sequence as much as I'm just settling into the sense of the whole body breathing. Keep doing this, and that becomes kind of the base of the whole meditation. But that's still a very broad action. And as attention begins to stabilize, I can then start to work more precisely with attention. And so this list of the jhana factors is a list of 5 aspects of attention, or aspects of inward experience, really, that that we can cultivate, and that as each of them becomes strong, as they all become strong together, they support heading into what's called neighborhood immersion, or neighborhood concentration, or the, you know, the front yard of the mansion that is jhana. Jhana is the Pāli term for absorption. It refers to a whole sequence of states where meditation, rather than being a struggle to bring the mind back from distraction or stay focused, the attention and that which attention is directed toward really lock in together, or settle together, or merge together, or unify into a single, pretty effortless steadiness that can then last for a while. And they're really, in a way, quite different states, even than like peak experiences or things that we might experience for a moment. They're definitely like peak experiences, but they have the interesting quality that many peak experiences don't, especially peak relational or emotional or religious or spiritual experiences don't, that they sustain. One of the really special things about jhana is that they're like peak experiences, but you can learn to stretch them out for very long periods of time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, several hours. Folks can get really good at these. And they're not easy for many of us in a fractured kind of nervous system culture, but they can be trained, and they are definitely available, and they change lives. Folks who learn to spend time in these states, it really changes how they move in the world. Okay, that's my selling. Practice jhana, the Buddha would say, you know. And so the 5 jhana factors, the first 2 are ways of talking about how we use attention that we've talked about a bunch in recent weeks, vitakka and vichara. You can use applied and directed thought, or aiming and sustaining, or connecting and sustaining attention. The third is rapture, piti. The fourth is sukha, happiness or bliss. And the fifth is ekaggata, one-pointedness or single-pointedness. So the first 2 we've talked about a bunch in here, vitakka and vichara. They're always talked about as a pair. Some folks think that they're kind of just synonyms, but I like the translations that differentiate them in terms of vitakka being the initial action and moment of attention being directed to something. So when you turn your attention to something, like you turn your gaze to something, that's a kind of vitakka, right? I'm applying or aiming awareness towards something. We do this consciously and unconsciously, right? Anytime something draws your attention, there's a bit of vitakka. But here it really initially means volitional, right? And for the whole beginning part of immersion practice, you have to do this on purpose. It's a training, right? We have so many habits of distraction. This is the training in how to bring the attention back from distraction and reconnect it with something. So there's a connective quality to it. And then the second, vichara, is sustaining thought, sustaining attention, staying connected. It can also refer to a kind of discernment or analysis, like you're thinking about or feeling about or investigating a little bit something. A modern teacher in the Burmese system, Sayadaw U Pandita, would talk about this like you bring 2 fingers together and you rub them. So there's the initial contact, and then there's a kind of rubbing. So you connect with the breath, but you don't just kind of glance off of it. He would be like, oh, if you kind of just touch it, the mind can kind of bounce off, like, yeah, there's the breath, and then I'm off wandering again. But it's like, no, you touch it and then you stay. And I might say, like, you become intimate. It's like, oh, breathing, breathing. What's breathing like? You're really staying with the sensation of breathing, the feeling, the knowing of breath, the mystery of breath. Again, don't get too thinky about it, but you can think some about the breath. It can be helpful to really think about your object, to apply and direct thought in this first one. So this is interesting partly because often we think of meditative immersion as being entirely thoughtless, but it's not necessarily the case. And this is a place where you can use thought to help connect. So, right. So even just naming what you're doing, like breathing in, breathing out, is a kind of vitakka and vichara. Vitakka connects, names the thing, and then breathing in. I'm staying with it the whole time. So there's a kind of sustainedness and a sort of investigative quality. You have to investigate it a little bit to know whether it's long or short, even just that. So there is a kind of discernment in it. So those two are the primary things that we volitionally practice. You really work on those. And they come on their own with long practice, but you can work on them. Like any skill, you learn to stay with it. The third of the jhana factors is piti, and this is usually translated as rapture. And it's almost always described in the classical texts using a set kind of metaphors or similes that point to somatic experience. So, that it feels like goosebumps all over your body, or like being in a soft rain, or like lightning flashes going off. These are classic bodily energetic descriptions that in a kind of cross-traditional way sound very much like descriptions that will come somewhat later in the yogic systems, describing things like kriya or kundalini, energetic movement in the body. So if you have familiarity with those discourses, you can think of piti and kundalini as being similar, except that kundalini comes with a whole mythic overlay about it being, a coiled sleeping goddess in the pelvis that's essentially like sublimated sexual energy that is cosmic at the same time. All of that later tantric stuff, beautiful, powerful mythos, is not present in the early Buddhist system, where piti is talked about, again, as is usual in the Buddhist system, in a very pragmatic, non-mythic kind of way. It's not described as a deity or a god or goddess of any kind. It's just a thing that happens. Kundalini in the later system gets super mythic. Psychosexual cosmic goddess deep in the pelvis awakens. In the early system, it's not that. In the early Buddhist system, it's really almost just like it's a thing that happens in the body mind, in the energetic body, when there's sufficient tranquility in the body, so you have to really relax for this to happen, and gatheredness in the attention. So the beginnings of steady attention starts to make this happen. And in a way, what it feels like partly is just that when there's this much less distracted thought and spinning in story, and some sustained presence with the body feeling relaxed and safe, it's almost like that automatically feels good. Feeling safe feels good. Feeling calm feels good. Feeling focused feels good. And if you bring all those together, like I feel safe and calm and focused, that just feels good. And that feeling good has a somatic quality called piti. Right? And piti it's described in these kind of somatic terms, but like we were saying about emotion, that's also an emotional thing. Like to be well gives rise to an upwelling of emotion, and so it's almost like to be this well, even for a few moments, is thrilling. So there's a kind of thrill through the body. So you can think of PT in that way, even before, and don't worry about like, oh, I don't get meditative fireworks. No problem. Most folks don't. If you do, 80% of the time it's not PT, it's trauma anyway. So there's that. So don't fixate on it, right? And there's a lot of that in the kind of Kundalini discourses. It can start to seem like, oh, it's really sexy, it's complicated, energetics happen. And mostly the instruction is to let it go. But as a jhana factor, it's actually to be cultivated. And the main thing to do here, of course, is if you find yourself launching into story about it, first of all, it's going to stop because story interrupts it. But that's just more distracting. Then you're just back in the hindrances. The pathway is to continue this practice of fully embodied, relaxed focus, so that these factors of aimed and sustained attention, connected, intimate, sustained attention with the body, energized by the, or nourished by the breath, feeling good, feeling safe, starts to thrill. And there's often a peak of this kind of bright thrill, and it can be strong or quite weak or mellow. But the following factor is kind of the emotional other side of it. And this fourth jhana factor is called sukha, and it's happiness or ease or bliss. And so you might think of piti as the somatic energetic and sukha as the emotional cognitive. Like there's a knowing that I'm at ease. And there's like here's a question to touch back into the mystery of what emotions are. The prototypical emotion, we might say, is happiness, right? It's one of the categorical, emotions. What does happiness feel like? It's happy. A lot of people, if you say, what is happy? What they'll do is they'll describe a situation in which they feel happy. It's like, well, happy is when I'm walking my dog. Happy is when I'm with my sweetheart. Happy is when I'm, in the woods. That's a situation. That's not a feeling. That's a condition that supports happiness. What is happiness? And so here, there's really the fleshing out of like, oh, the condition for this kind of happiness is now the kind of the profound absence of disturbance in the form of the hindrances, the defilements, the conditions of non-safety, non-ease. There's also aspects like, this becomes easier if you've been keeping the precepts for a good long time. So you've been tending your actions and speaking with mindfulness and not committing misconduct of various kinds. And there's a very particular absence that is the absence of regret, the absence of obsessing about past words and actions that may have caused harm to ourselves or others. So the only way to have absence of regret is to not do things that would give rise to regret. And you have to do that for a while to kind of, work through your old store of unwholesome actions. So you live with the precepts for some time. And after a while, there's this thing called the bliss of blamelessness that starts to be available, where it's like, it's not like you do everything right, but it's like, I've lived in accordance with my ethics for some time. And that's good. And if somebody got upset with me, I was doing the best I can, and I've learned how to repair, and I understand intent and impact. I've really done a bunch of work around my actions such that I don't have to fret about them when I sit down to meditate. And so this is also a support for sukha, ease. So the word happiness is great, and bliss is great, but one of the translations that for me that really touches my heart is this translation, the ease of well-being, for sukha, the ease of well-being. We say it in the metta phrases sometimes. May all beings experience the ease of well-being. And so There's, gathered and sustained intimacy of contact with attention with its object, with the whole body. There's the thrill of of safety, steadiness, gatheredness, non-distraction. And then deeper than that, there's the sweet, settled ease of well-being. So all of that takes some amount of concentration or gatheredness, bringing together of the heart, mind, the faculties. This bringing together is a translation of the word samatha or samadhi, similar words, to refer to this coming together of our disparate parts. So this coming together supports these factors. And then the fifth of the factors is really the kind of culmination of this coming together. And it's ekagata, meaning all going in one way. Right? So we say one-pointedness, but there's also the sense of like this is now a heart mind that is going in one way, and that one way is toward immersion and toward liberation. So ekagata is really like it kind of crystallizes together, and this is like more like a purity of non-distraction. And these same jhana factors are going to be the defining qualities of the sequence of states once one enters jhana or absorption proper, these deeply stabilized states. They're characterized by this sequence. The first jhana is characterized by vitakka and vichara. The second jhana is characterized by piti. The third jhana is characterized by sukha, happiness. The fourth jhana is characterized by ekagata, one-pointedness. It's called the perfection of mindfulness. But all of these qualities are also present long before full absorption in a state called neighborhood or access to immersion, access concentration. And so even in ordinary practice, we can cultivate these and look for them and invite them in the way that we always talk about the wholesome states. They, even when they're absent, they can be invited. And you can't make bodily rapture happen. You can't make, bliss happen, right? And these particularly are the raptures and blisses that come from the gathered and collected and relaxed state. And so even though you can make rapture and bliss happen through other means, right, through medicinal means or other yogic means, it's not exactly the same. It can be helpful, it can be healing, it can be wonderful, but it's not exactly piti, because the presence of the sensory, of a different sensory object in the field changes the conditions that are giving rise to these states. So if I need to be in relationship to a sensory experience in order to experience piti, then it's not piti that is directly connected to immersion or concentration fully, because it's still tied to the sensory realm, even if that's a healthy sensory input, you know. And so there's kinds of piti, of course, that come with sexuality, that come with different kinds of medicines, that come with exercise. But what we're looking for in this set, in the jhana factors, is really the piti and the sukha that come not from relationship with anything in the sensory or sensual world, but really just from the maturing of the qualities of seclusion of the senses, gatheredness of attention, intimacy with the field of the body-mind, the somatic and affective field, and the subsiding of all of the disruptions in the somatic field that we call the hindrances, the defilements. So there's a deep connection between these qualities arising and the maturing of this kind of fundamental quality of tranquility or ease through the body. So as you play in your meditation, just bring this list to mind sometimes, or any one of the qualities that draws you. You don't try to make it happen other than vitaka and vichara, which you should practice incessantly for a long time and get good at them. Like any art, they take repeated practice. Daily is good. But the others, it's more like you open to them as a possibility. And so when I get calm, whatever the state of my body is, I connect with the whole body. And what I'm looking for is the subtle thrill of presence, right? The subtle thrill of intimacy with the here and now. And this is the last thing I'll emphasize here, is that this is a core trauma intervention or nervous system resolution kind of skill, which is that attention can choose what to pay attention to. And so even as I orient around the room, I'm letting my gaze wander, um, you know, uh, I have a gentle intention to let my gaze land on that which is beautiful or restful or draws me in. Because we are always trying to, when we're in environments of sufficient safety, we're always trying to undo the old habit, the deep hindrance. This is really the hindrance of ill will or aversion toward that's called negativity bias. The nervous system wants to look at the negative because it thinks that doing so will keep it safe. That's an old animal body instinct. To undo that, we make the choice to turn the attention toward the positive, toward that which is wholesome and feels good. As long as we're in a safe enough space that we can let go of vigilance, we can turn our attention toward that which is beautiful, that which is wholesome. And so we do that in the inner realm as well. Here's the whole body. And for a little bit, I ignore the aches and pains. And instead, I focus on the bright, shimmering field that I can tune into. It's a little bit quieter than the aches and pains sometimes. That's all right. You just ignore them. They're there. You're taking care of your body. But then right beneath it or behind it or around it or encompassing it in a field of sweetness is a kind of hum of delicious presence. And you can tune into that and learn to tune into that and listen for it with all the nerve endings. And that's the doorway. It's one of the doorways to PT. All right. Thanks for listening so warmly.